Hi, Titus.
Hello, how are
I,
you?
I'm a huge fan of the show.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
I want to ask you, so there's this constant conflict between your character's sense of morality and sense of ethics in the show, right?
Hmm.
How did you reconcile one with the other?
Well, I think there are sort of two different versions of Bosch, and he says very early on, from the original show, inside of everyone are two different dogs fighting, right? And there's the good dog and the bad dog, and
Mm,
that which you become is on which dog you feed. And I think because what we come into contact with is a backstory about
mm,
Harry's experience in war when he was a soldier. And I've always
mm,
said that Harry is first and foremost a soldier. His military service was long and very distinguished. But when that story is told, because Harry does not discuss his his past. He's not a war story guy, and the
mm,
truth is that most veterans don't discuss their experience in war. So that's been something that he's never talked about. And then Maddie hears this story about an interrogation, which raises questions for her about how well
mm,
does she know her father, and questions his moral compass. She knows that he's a good man and that he's a very, very righteous cop, and she wants
mm,
to emulate the sort of relentless nature of him as a cop. But
mm,
it creates conflict. And I think also what we see that challenges Harry's moral compass.
mm,
Any detective who is a murder cop, right, will tell you that
mm,
all the cases, they carry those with them.
mm,
And it requires a person to look into the darkness, into the abyss. And that in
mm,
itself is very difficult to navigate. But when you bring the cases that haunt them the most are cases that involve children. And so
mm, mm,
we find Harry at a crossroads with himself, um,
mm,
as to what he is willing to do. Is he willing to compromise his morality to obtain justice, and
mm,
maybe to a degree of to obtain revenge,
mm,
or
mm,
the one thing that he's, or to avenge, right?
mm, mm, mm.
Is the obtaining of justice enough, or must it go further? So that creates a lot of dramatic tension, not only
Mm,
between
mm.
Harry and Maddie, but the people that surround him.
I wanted to know which is there series, is there a season or a specific episode from from back when the original show was on that really resonated with you? For me, I could tell you that my favorite episode in any detective series, one of my favorite, is that part where your character finally discovers his mother's killer.
Yes. Well,
It's really fascinating.
yeah, well, I think, look, that's the reason that he became a cop.
Mm,
Harry has this enormous backlog of trauma, of emotional trauma from, the loss of his mother, who was murdered when he was 12 years old, and the fact that because she was a sex worker, she
mm,
was she was a part of a marginalized part of society, and that the police did not put the effort or energy into solving her case. And so
mm,
hence his credo, right? Everybody counts or nobody counts. And that's been
mm,
his
mm,
driving force. And so that, I agree with you. And shooting that stuff, and John Getz was wonderful. And also the way that I always say that Michael Connolly is the master of literary judo, right? We thought that the killer was one person, and then we discover it's an entirely different person. And as that unfolds, and ultimately when he came and tracked him in the tunnels, and he had that
mm,
moment of confrontation and had the gun against his head.
mm,
That was a very, very big moment,
mm,
where I think in everyone's mind they thought, is he going to kill him? And um, I think that was handled, but yeah, I would agree with you with that. There've been so many other cases, but the build up to that, I think, was
mm,
was was really, really strong. Um,
mm,
and I think this case, to a certain degree, mirrors that, right? Because here's Harry, who grew up without a family. Was
mm,
basically a street kid until he joined the army, and here he's looking at this kind of beautiful family filled with love and joy, and these children, and this thing that he never had, and their lives were snatched away from
mm,
them horribly. Um, and so I think all the cases with Harry are personal, but this one has a different kind of resonance because of the
mm.
because of the involvement of children.
Sometimes while doing this show, do you ever wonder, oh, I didn't have first-hand knowledge of that. I wish I had seen that just as an audience. The suspense.
Well, there's a certain degree of that that
Mm,
that occurs in the process of the writers coming together, and we would sit and we would talk about what was going to happen. And then sometimes, in the early part, or we get into mid-season, and they would say, we've made a choice to do something. It's a slightly different direction. We're going to go here. So,
mm,
but I still, despite the fact that I read the scripts, I acted the scenes, when I
mm,
see the final assembly of a show, um,
mm,
I I'm able to separate myself enough from what I'm watching to sort of not re-experience it, but experience it in a very visceral way. Because
mm,
when you're in it and you're acting it, you're
mm,
it's incomplete. And then when it's
mm,
assembled, then I'm able to experience it, to a certain degree, in the same way that the audience that has no previous knowledge of what's coming. And I,
mm.
I think I think there's a lot of that occurs, particularly in this season.
So I don't know how much more minute I have. I just want to get this out of the way. Did you know that Boss Legacy season 3 would be the finale
No,
previously? No, no.
no.
When
Um,
when you got to know that, what was going through your mind at that time?
Well, I felt sad because
Mm,
I forged relationships with actors and writers and producers and our crew. You
mm,
become a family, and over a decade, those
yeah,
bonds are very, very close. And
mm,
um, and so it's been a perfect storm, for lack of a
mm,
better word. And
mm,
there's many more stories to tell, and you don't want it to. I miss Harry. People ask me, and I said, well, I'm not an actor who brings my work home. I'm an actor portraying a character, but
mm,
I formed an emotional bond with that character over the
mm.
years. So it's almost like he's a living, breathing character. Um, and so there's you know, I wish that I could call him up and call up Harry and go and have lunch with him, or go to Musso and Frank's and have dinner.
Lo- Lovely, lovely, lovely. It's one of my favorite. There are these characters, right? Right. There's Jason Bourne. There is John Wick. I often felt like if Harry is with me, I'd be very safe.
Yes, there's no question about it. And if a person was a victim of a crime, they would want Harry Bosch to be working the case, because it's all very personal to him, and he's
Mm,
relentless. he will not give up. J. Edgar, the character would always say, "Oh, he's like a dog with a bone," and he is. He will not let go, and
Mm.
that's what you want. And he's a he's an anti-hero, but he's a guy, not unlike police officers and military people and firemen. He goes into a building that everyone's running out of, and that that's a requires tremendous courage. And so I get it. It'd be fun to see Jason Bourne, John Wick, and Harry Bosch team up. Forget about it.
Right?
Can you
Right.
imagine?
Yeah.
That would be
Yeah.
very
It will be
exciting.
great. It will be great. It will be the Avengers of detectives, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right then. Thank you. Thank you so much for the entertainment.
Thank you very much. Thanks. It was a pleasure talking with you. Have a great day.